This week on Business Brief, we take a look at how the big beautiful bill will affect the solar energy industry in Missouri. Then we hear from officials at MU Extension on how Missouri farmland values are changing. Welcome back to Business Brief, Missouri Business Alert's podcast focused on the business news and issues shaping the state. My name is Noah Grabianski, and I'm joined by my co-host,
Yasha Mikołajczuk. You know, Noah, as we record this on Thursday, tonight is a full moon.
Did you know that they refer to July's full moon as a buck moon?
I did not.
Apparently it's because it's said to be the time of year when male deer begin to grow their antlers.
Wow, that's actually really cool. But speaking of bucks, should we get to the business news of the week?
Oh, bucks and money.
Yeah.
Bucks like money and business.
Yeah.
I see what you did there. Let's get into some headlines. President Donald Trump extended the temporary pause on tariffs from dozens of countries until August 1st this week. The administration promised 90 deals in 90 days back in April, and the 90-day timeframe ended this week. Only 2 deals were made in that time, with the United Kingdom and Vietnam. Now, Trump has threatened additional tariffs against 14 countries, including Japan and South Korea. Japan is the third largest market for Missouri exports, purchasing about $840 million worth last year.
Governor Mike Keogh on Wednesday signed 13 bills into law, a number of which included bipartisan education provisions. The new laws will make it easier for retiring educators to step in as substitute teachers and will require school districts to restrict cell phone usage to minimize classroom distractions. Other pieces of legislation set up career technical education programs for high schoolers and expand transferable credit hours for colleges and universities.
The Missouri Highways and Transportation Commission approved the statewide transportation improvement program on Wednesday. The $13 billion project will fund improvements to Interstates 70 and 44, as well as a number of bridges, rail crossings, airports, and minor roads. The improvements are slated to be made between next summer and the summer of 2030. Nearly 34,000 miles of highway and over 10,000 bridges and underpasses are scheduled for maintenance.
The Gateway Arch Park Foundation has closed on its purchase of the Millennium Hotel in downtown St. Louis. The site has sat vacant since 2014, and the foundation has been in talks to purchase it for nearly a year. Real estate developer the Cordish Companies will partner with the foundation to build a 1.3 million square foot site to house residential, office, and commercial spaces where the hotel now stands. The project is set to cost around $670 million. The foundation is now establishing a public-private agreement in order for development to officially begin.
Kansas has more time to negotiate stadium deals with the Kansas City Chiefs and Royals after lawmakers extended the deadline for the teams to accept development bond packages from the state. The incentives would support teams willing to invest $1 billion in a new stadium. The offers were initially set to expire on June 30th, but they were extended through to the end of the year. Both teams have leases expiring in 2031 and have competing incentive offers from Missouri passed during a special session in June. So, Yasha, I know you've been covering the solar industry lately. Can you tell me what's new?
Yeah, for sure. So with the passage of President Donald Trump's bill to cut taxes and spending, the solar industry stands to lose some federal subsidies. The Inflation Reduction Act of 2022 extended a 30% residential clean energy credit until 2034, but Trump's bill, which was signed into law last week, will eliminate these tax credits at the end of 2025.
So how is that going to impact solar power in Missouri?
Well, with the loss of the 30% tax credit for residential solar installation, many companies are worried about the future of the industry. Some fear that customers will be less inclined to install solar panels without the subsidy.
Wow, so how are these businesses planning to adapt?
That's what I sought to find out. I talked to some experts and local solar businesses to see how they plan to move forward once the tax credits are eliminated. Here's that story. When President Donald Trump signed the One Big Beautiful Bill into law on July 4th, it altered existing tax and spending laws, but one change in particular could have an outsized impact on the solar industry. It will do away with a key tax credit that subsidized the installation of residential solar systems, leaving many solar companies with a very small window to adapt to the changes.
We existed before when there were very few subsidies because these were Bush-era energy tax credits that have now been phased out, but they were expanded with add-ons. So, and then they were, during the Inflation Reduction Act, and all the clean energy credits got a huge boost in 2022. Now they've been seriously curtailed or phased out.
That was Jonathan Dolan. He is the executive director of the Missouri Solar Energy Industries Association. The Inflation Reduction Act, which was introduced during the Biden-Harris administration, extended the 30% residential tax credit for homeowners who implemented clean energy alternatives in their homes, such as solar systems. However, with the One Big Beautiful bill, the tax credit will go away at the end of the year. Ryan McDonald, the chief operating officer at Solera Energy, feels that it is unfair for the solar industry to lose this key tax credit, while other energy-producing industries like oil and coal are bolstered by the federal government.
All solar has ever wanted is a level playing field once we could get to that point. Well, what the current administration has done is they've basically gone into solar, attacked it because it was a Biden-era, addition to the tax credit. They said it was this green new scam and basically cut the industry off at its knees.
According to a 2022 report from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, Missouri had over 2,600 solar jobs in 2020 and was expected to have anywhere between 4,600 to nearly 6,900 solar jobs by 2030. However, with the tax credit ending, Dolan, the executive director of MoSEA, feels that many existing jobs may be lost, making it unlikely for solar employment to reach those levels, though the industry itself will survive.
Armageddon, no. Catastrophic, yes. And you're going to lose solar jobs. We're talking about 250,000 jobs nationally, thousands of jobs in Missouri. If a local small garage or small metal building operator, but is running 3, 4, 5 solar projects per day in a particular region in Missouri, and they change, or they don't have money because of the tax credit change for their sales operations or their service operations, things could get tougher. The solar roller coaster was already going up and down.
Ryan Rowe is the owner of Greenleaf Solar in Columbia. Over the past month, he has been keeping an eye on the Trump administration's policies and tariffs, which inspired him to stock up on inventory.
There was talks of tariffs, and so I'm sitting here thinking, okay, what can I do to kind of protect myself from, these price hikes? And so I decided, let's go ahead and buy like a year's worth of this and that, whether it's rails and, which is ultimately just aluminum. And so I made a lot of these purchases, and now it's like, oh, it looks like, you're not really going to need anything after 6 months.
But with the impending end to the solar tax credit, Rowe is concerned that he won't be able to use up his stockpile materials before the demand for solar dries up. Although he has an abundance of jobs scheduled in the coming months, he fears that business will sharply decline after the end of the year when the tax credits are no longer available.
We will be very busy. We're already very busy this summer. But basically, once 2026 hits, I've already told the guys, that they're not going to have a job after that.
Although the forecast for the solar industry may seem cloudy now, McDonald of Solera Energy says there is still a lot of details surrounding the new law that are up in the air.
So the problem is there have been people reaching out, but we're unclear on any of it. So legislation is changing daily. It seems like even though the bill was passed, even the language in it is questionable. So now it's going to go over to attorneys and CPAs to figure it all out. Unfortunately, we're in a holding pattern because we don't know. And that's what makes it really difficult in our area.
I understand you were looking into agriculture this week, Noah.
I was. University of Missouri Extension recently released its Missouri Farmland Values survey, which looks at how farmers have been interacting with and thinking about farmland in the state.
Interesting, yeah. So what did the survey find?
In a word, stability. I got a chance to sit down with Ben Brown and Taylor Ann Washburn from MU Extension, who helped compile the survey, to go a little more in depth on what they found. Here's a part of that conversation. Ben and Taylor Ann, thank you so much for joining me today. First of all, could you guys just introduce yourselves real quick for the audience?
Yeah, I'm Taylor Ann Washburn, and I work with University of Missouri Extension.
My name is Ben Brown, and I work with University of Missouri Extension's Ag Business and Policy team, primarily in row crop economics.
First of all, what was your experience in kind of compiling the survey and writing the report, and what were some of the biggest things that jumped out to you?
Yeah, sounds great. So this is an annual survey that is conducted by MU Extension every year. We've been doing this a while. We had 417 respondents this year, representing just a little over 2,000 ag land transactions.
And I'll say something unique about Missouri. We don't have public availability of seeing land sales transactions, so we rely heavily on those responses to help us get those insights.
So what makes this fact sheet so popular is, one, the regional farmland value data and comparison year over year. But I also think it digs into more information: who's buying the land, why they might be buying it, who's selling the land, why they might be selling it. Those are all pieces of information that are subjective, but certainly we try to corroborate that with other information that we can look at to say, okay, based on farmer sentiment, do we think that this reflects what's happening in the land markets across the state?
One of the biggest takeaways from this recent survey was that there was an expected rise in timberland and hunting and recreational land. What does this mean for you guys in both kind of the short and medium term as well as the long term?
Yeah, so ever since the COVID pandemic, we've seen people take great interest in getting outdoors and investing in recreational activities, whether that be at the many lakes and rivers that we have here in Missouri, or even hunting. Hunting is a very viable and growing industry in Missouri. And I think that continues to drive our hunting and recreational land markets, and the survey certainly supports that again this year.
You mentioned earlier that one of the most interesting things about collecting the data is that you can split it up into different sections. Of the 10 sections, were there any that kind of jumped out to you with interesting trends or unique trends?
So we noticed that in our eastern urban area of the state around St. Louis, we saw that people were reporting the highest land values, and we saw that in last year's survey as well. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, we saw lower reported land values in the south central part of Missouri in that region.
That was also the area of the state where we saw probably the biggest variety or range between the low productivity ag land and high productivity ag land.
One of the biggest things that jumped out to me personally was that according to the MU Rural and Farm Finance Policy Analysis Center, there was an estimated 23% decrease in Missouri net farm income in 2026. So can you tell me a little bit about where that 23% comes from? What kind of accounts for that?
Yeah, so this is an estimate. It's our estimate for the change in farm income from 25 to 26. One of the asterisks that I do want to put in here that I think is notable is when these estimates were calculated, it was based on current policy at the time. And so when we think about why such a strong drop in net farm income, that 23%, a good chunk of that, almost 700 million, a little over 700 million of that was attributed to a decrease in government farm program payments. Now, here recently, the One Big Beautiful Bill from Congress was passed, and it includes very sizable increases in commodity reference prices that go into effect for the 2025 crop that'll be paid out in 2026. So we haven't finished all the analysis and working through what that does to changes in government payments, but maybe that drop isn't as big as 23%.
If you guys could sum up this year's survey in one word or a phrase, what would you guys say?
For me, I'd say stable. We aren't seeing the rise in farmland values in 25 that we saw the last couple of years. We were seeing double-digit increases in ag land values just as recent as 2 years ago. So not as quickly appreciating as what we saw, but stable.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Ben took my word. I was going to say stable as well, but I'll say a bit shifting, and not necessarily in terms of exact values, but just seeing a bit more shift in that interest. But Ben stole my word.
Well, thank you guys so much. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Thanks for having us. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming in, you guys. Now it's time for our words of the week. Yasha, what's your word?
My words this week are wins and losses.
I sense something sports related.
That's correct. Wins and losses, as in the St. Louis Cardinals are winning games but losing fans.
As a lifelong Cubs fan, I gotta say, I kind of wish they were losing games too.
Ooh.
How many fans are they losing?
Missouri Business Alert's Charlie Warner crunched the numbers on this. Just past the midway point of the season, the Cards were averaging about 6,000 fewer fans per home game this season, which was the second largest drop in the league. That's despite the Cardinals having a winning record, and it comes as the average attendance at MLB games has risen.
So what about Missouri's other major league team, the Kansas City Royals? How are they doing?
They're seeing an opposite trend. Despite having a losing record, they averaged nearly 4,000 more fans per game through their first 44 home games. That's an increase of 21% from last year, when the Royals made the playoffs for the first time in almost a decade.
I guess it's a real tale of two baseball cities. It's like Dickens meets MLB.
Nice. Yeah, it's worth noting the Cardinals still have a higher average attendance than the Royals, but the changes for both teams are pretty substantial. What's your word today, Noah?
My word today is Whoa, Nelly!
Yeehaw!
A professional horse racing team is coming to St. Louis as the National Thoroughbred League is relocating their Seattle team. This team is going to now be called the St. Louis Nellies.
What, like hot in here, Nelly?
Actually, yes. Nelly, who is a native of St. Louis, was an early investor in the team. The actual numbers haven't been released, but the musician apparently has significant ownership in the Nellies.
I didn't even know there was a horse racing league.
Me neither, and that might be because it was launched only 2 years ago.
Oh.
They've styled their races after track meets, and they have 10 teams right now across the country, including in New York, San Francisco, Phoenix, and Miami, just to name a few.
Well, now it's time for our closing thought.
Our closing thought today is from Taylor Ann Washburn from MU Extension. She touched on the importance of finances in business, whether that be in agriculture or otherwise.
I think, honestly, regardless of what your business is, being able to look at your costs and returns, looking at your price of doing business is going to be really important now and going forward, and just really understanding, having a pulse on your operation and your finances.
Well, that is all for this week. M33 Project and Wolf provided the music for this episode. For my co-host Yasumika Wychuk and editors Kelly DeRook and Michael Stacy, I'm Noah Grabianski. Thank you so much for listening.